Hello, and welcome to another episode of Fishing for Answers. Today, I've got a very special guest with me, Bob Turner from Penn State. So, Bob, maybe you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about yourself and maybe even how you got into cybersecurity in the first place.
Oh, okay. So long ago and far away.
Long ago and far away. I love it.
I joined the U.S. Navy, and as a 19-year-old, still wet behind the ears, young man, I actually was given responsibility for securing classified material in our organization. And back then, my data server was a 4 drawer safe that weighed about 400 pounds, which they thought was still enough that they wanted to weld it to the deck of the submarine I was on. Uh, so, so I had information security background. I've got a physical security background, but then I eventually, I was a submarine radioman, and then I was a communications officer in the Navy. And what that meant is I went from, terrestrial communications, where's the signal coming from, to uh, encrypting data using cryptographic properties and machines. And then I
Yeah.
went to the networks that were being created on ships and shore stations at the time, and all of that was like foundational. But it wasn't like people who are growing up today, where it's always there and always in their face, and it has been ever since birth. For
Yeah.
me, it was something new I had to learn along the way. But I am
Yeah.
so thankful for that foundation, because when I retired from the Navy and I started working in the cyber world, all of that became good information to draw from to understand how the new cyber world worked.
Yeah.
So from the Navy, I became a consultant, and in that role, I had an opportunity to really understand how to build processes and build programs, and so cybersecurity was one of the things that I was doing as part of that.
Okay.
Um, Exciting world from 2001, when I started working as a civilian, until um, 2015. So
Right.
basically, 14 years working in the consulting world. But then I got a chance to become a university CISO in Wisconsin. So the University of Wisconsin Madison was looking for a CISO. I came in with apparently what they wanted because they said yes. And from there, it was taking all those leadership lessons I had
Yeah.
learned. I went from there to a company called Fortinet, which was an equipment company.
I've heard
They,
of them.
yeah, you may have heard of them. Uh, in my role there, I was the field CISO for education. So I still CISO mindset, CISO thinking. Um, and I guess backtracking, when I was doing the consulting job, I was consulting with what was a CISO equivalent back then. They didn't call them that, but that's what they were doing.
Yeah,
Um,
CISO wasn't a thing until what, like 2010-ish or something around there?
yeah, it started crawling in around 2010 ish. That's probably about right. Um, so from that CISO role to the field CISO role, I was responsible for helping to interpret CISO speak for the marketing and the equipment developers and the sales groups. Um, from there, I had the opportunity to start work in a startup organization that was building a CISO capability for small businesses to use. So the small to moderate sized businesses are the ones who can least afford a full time CISO, right? Um, that was a fun experience because I learned a lot. But now I am at the Penn State University as their CISO,
That's awesome.
and this is a great environment to be in. Higher education is a challenge because there's a lot of people that think differently than some corporate folks think, but I see that that's a plus,
Yeah,
because as CISO now, my goal is to create the strategy and create the team that is necessary to lead them to that next evolution of cybersecurity, and that's going to be the evolution that embraces AI with both arms, and
I agree.
continues to think about risk and ransomware and all of the other R words in the vocabulary. But it's also a great place to be a leader, and I look at that as, leadership has been my life journey. So here I am.
I mean, I think, that's a great way of putting it. Leadership has been my life journey, because honestly, it has in a lot of ways for me too. I mean, I remember when I first really got into security awareness. I tended to be, like, very punitive, even just in cybersecurity in general, it was, "This is my network, you're gonna do it this way,"
Hmm.
and as I got more and more, I guess, seasoned in cybersecurity or mature in cybersecurity, I realized that it's not that way, it's not my network, I'm here to help and advise and maybe come up with safer ways of doing things, but not to get in the way. And I think a lot of people do tend to have to learn that lesson the hard way. I mean, and when we're younger, we are a little bit more heavy with the stick. I think almost everybody is anyway. But I know I at one point created scareware. I thought it'd be a great way to get people to not click was by sending them or having them run what fake malware and scare them to death because that would like Pavlov's dog, right? Um,
That's funny. I was going that same direction. I mean, it's pattern response. If you're teaching them to be afraid of pushing the button, they're not going to push the button.
yeah, yeah. No, and I think that I mean to me that's why we run phishing simulations is so
Mhm.
that they can experience it. They can see the tactics that are used. And to me, that's the biggest part. See the tactics that are used, like
Mhm.
urgency. Because when they learn about urgency or authority and they become conscious of that bias that they have and that and more importantly, that it's used against them. The next time they see it, it's at a subconscious level. They're just like, nope, next and,
Mhm.
and I believe that's our bodies that our subconscious is our body's natural defense mechanism. Well, not I believe, it's proven to be, right? So all we have to do is
Yeah.
train it on how to identify these fish, and our subconscious will spot it every time. And I think that's why we run fishing simulations. I know I got
Yeah.
way off track there.
No, it's actually not too far off track from leadership, though. What you do in a leadership role is you try to create the situations where they're going to learn.
Yeah.
And fishing derbies, fishing drills, fishing outings.
I haven't
Uh,
heard it called a fishing derby.
well,
I've heard it called a
s-
fishing tournament before.
so very very interesting concept behind that is if you have two organizations that are close in the way that they work,
Yeah,
having one unit create the fish and seeing how many in the other unit bites and then reciprocal, you,
getting
you,
them
you give them
involved in
both a
the
chance to do
process.
that. They learn two things. Number one is to spot those common elements of phishing and maybe even some advanced elements. But they also learn that for every action, there is a reaction, and that reaction can be positive or negative.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. I mean, I think it's all about getting them engaged, and if
Mhm.
they create that fish, then they themselves are having to figure out the tactics. They themselves are having to figure out how they
Right.
would trick somebody. And it definitely would open their mind up to a lot of different principles, I imagine. But echoing, what you're saying about, leadership and giving them those opportunities, I think it's as much about praising them when they do something right and catching them when they do the things right. Actually, not
Mm.
as much, but more about that than it ever is about catching them doing something wrong. And, to go to the fishing analogy, so much emphasis is put on when they click. When I care so much more about when they don't click and more importantly, when they report.
Yeah. It's in my experience, it is something that has to be constantly practiced. We always learned about praise in public and rebuke in private, or however you want to phrase that. But in public, the award for the people that caught the fish first is important and probably in some ways more important than the training that got them to the point of being able to catch the fish.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree completely.
I do have, I mean, I have one experience about, fishing derbies programs or however you want to call it. You do have to teach before you test. There's not really the only test before you teach happens is when somebody did bite on the fish, and then you have to kind of pull them aside and say, well, here's how this could have been a better outcome. But in the case of a lot of the fishing programs, that prep work has to be in there first, saying this is why we're doing this, and this is how you could behave, and this is how we expect the outcome will be, and that just follows whatever your tactics and procedures are, and whatever your doctrine is going to be for how you deal with a fish.
Well, and I think that, uh, to me, we've got to tell people that we're gonna do it ahead of time,
Yes.
because if nothing else, it creates this hyper vigilance. When they know they're gonna be fished, they watch out for it. Uh, so I think that is an incredibly, critical part of that. Um, so when it comes to, and I can tell you're on the carrot side, big fan. I'm on team carrot too. But when it comes to carrots, for the old argument of carrot versus stick, what is your opinion? You know, when do we use the stick? Do we use it at all? How do we use carrots? Things like that.
I think in regard to life lessons in general, um, carrot is always the best approach. But it takes an awful long time to grow that carrot to a point where they're able to eat it and digest it. To carry the metaphor on just a little bit, you have to really prep the organization to be willing to accept those fishing opportunities, testing opportunities. But you also have to build around that. That it's not just the fishing drill that works. It's understanding the tools that you can put in place to help identify and help protect against phishing.
Yeah. Report
And if
it.
that's not part of your security mesh, then you need to really consider that as an area to focus on a little bit. Um,
Agreed.
but
Well,
I,
I
I
think that's the best KPI there is out there when we're running these things.
right,
I mean, yes, am I looking at fish click rate? Absolutely. But the KPI that I care the most about is the report rate. Because when I get
yes,
90% of people reporting that fish, I know I've got a strong culture. But if I
right.
have 10% reporting that fish, I know I've got a weak culture. And to me, I'm trying to measure culture more than anything else, and that is more of a proactive indicator.
And the wider variety of opportunities to identify in a safe environment is important, because they're going to take this fishing expertise that we give them, or teaching them how to fish. Um, excuse me. And they're going to carry that into their personal life. So, I, I, since I have been in the industry for a while, I can't imagine I can even quantify the amount of people that have come up and said, I saw this in an email, or I saw this on TV, or I saw this in whatever the medium they're communicating in, and because we had that understanding of what phishing is and what social engineering is, they were able to say, wait a minute, that's not real. And I you get them on your phone every day. You get that, this is
Yeah.
urgent. This is going to make you bigger and better and faster and cheaper than you were before.
Or the,
uh,
"Hey, Rachel, let's get lunch at noon today." So you'll reply and say, "Hey, I think you got the wrong number." And they'll be like, "Oh,
yeah,
you're so
yeah.
nice. Let's be friends so I can
Well,
steal your money."
so that goes in what I call cold calling fish.
It is a form of cold calling. It really is.
Yeah, it really is, and it's, I get them on LinkedIn a lot. Hi, how are you? That's all they say. I'm fine. Yourself? Just trying to be nice and casual, and it almost to probably an 85 to 90%. They either go nowhere because I'm not responsive, or they come in with their offer and that offer is not something that I would even be remotely interested in.
Yeah.
So that's the case of knowing yourself and knowing your tendency to react to those situations is important, and I think that fishing drills are good for that. So
Not just
people will
fishing drills, but teaching them the tactics around fishing.
right.
Like,
So the drill is the test, but if you have that understanding beforehand, then the drill will result in better outcomes because they'll either self-refer that they understood and they're not going to click, but they're going to report,
yep.
or they'll just kind of go on the opposite end of that spectrum. They'll click it and say, "Oh man, what happened? What did I just do?" And
So
then they worry about if they're going to get in trouble for it. But a good fishing program is it's the counsel and advice and teach them how to understand rather than the heavy-handed hammer.
agreed. And ideally, they're not worried about getting in trouble. They're worried about being embarrassed, you know?
Yeah.
That should be the worst of it. And I realize that there's very secure environments, but
Hmm.
I sort of come from the approach of this. We work with the users we can to get them to be more secure. For those users that demonstrate over and over again, they're not going to be more secure. I don't believe in firing them. I believe in dynamically altering their access. So if we know they're going to be less secure, let's segment them off the network. Let's, really restrict them within the PAN solution. Let's increase their MFA requirements. Let's harden their system. There's so many things that we can do with that user to mitigate the threat 10 times more than we already are. And when it's only like 0.1% of the population or 0.2% of the population, it's not a big lift to go out and harden. Well, not a huge. It's a big lift, but maybe not a huge, massive lift. Um, but I don't know, that's sort of where I look at things is that, we wanna stop as many clicks as we can, but there are going to be the occasional people that still do, and for those, we wanna have those dynamic controls in place to block.
Mhm. Yeah, I think anything that we do has to take in the total operation in play here, and we have people doing work on the web and work on the local networks that needs to be done. It's how do we help them do it better, and so it should be the offer should be to help, and they learn in the process of doing that.
Yes.
I was at an organization that said, "Well, let's just put the list of offenders," and it was like, you remember when you used to go to the post
The
office and they
wall of
had that?
shame, like a death
Yeah,
on the wall of sheep.
yeah, yeah, and I just never found value in that because the real thing is when people understand. Uh, it's after repeated instruction and after repeated opportunities to do things in a safe environment, they learn, and then when they get into the real world, they will react appropriately and they will do what like you said, they're reporting instead of clicking, or they're identifying and making sure that others know too. They're sharing that understanding, sharing that knowledge. Hey, I almost clicked on this, but here's what sent me in the direction of reporting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, the more we make it continuous and front of mind, the
Mm,
more that those types of conversations happen. Because
yeah,
when it's security is ingrained in your culture, your people will have conversations about security.
yeah,
If security is not ingrained in your culture, well, of course, they're not going to have conversations about security. And, when I look at it, I want that water cooler talk. Now, I
yeah,
don't want them warning people about phishing simulations, but I do want them talking about, whatever new trick they learned, or did you hear about that attack that Bob was telling us about? That is bringing more awareness, and so we do want
right.
some element of that. And if we're, doing our phishing simulations right, then it doesn't matter if they warn people at the water cooler. They're just spreading best practices because
Yeah.
their person they're giving is gonna get a different fish.
Well, and amplifying the carrot versus stick, carrots taste better and they're more nutritious than sticks.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. I'm honestly surprised there's still an argument there, but there is a huge, camp over in team stick inside of this industry, I've realized, so we still have a lot of people. In fact, some of the biggest books on the subject in this industry that talk about running a program, they go straight to the stick.
Mm.
That's the part that just baffles me. So if I'm new to this and I go and buy one of the top books about it and I read it, it's gonna tell me to go straight to the stick. So, um,
I've been in the education world to way too long because I always think that there's opportunities to provide the experiences where people can learn,
yeah,
and learning is empowering.
yeah,
When I hear from one of my teenage grandkids about they saw this line in an email and they knew that it was a fish right away. I take that personally because they know what I do for a living and they know where um, uh, I work and the type of things that I deal with, and that makes me feel really good that they understand.
yeah.
And I know that they're going to be just a little bit better when they get out into the quote real world, and they're dealing with this stuff on a regular basis.
Uh, yeah, I completely agree. So, switching gears a little bit here, what if you're building a program from the ground up, what are some of the things that you're gonna focus on and maybe some tips that you might have for, well, a CISO that is building a security awareness program from the ground up?
So I guess it's really understand and sort of lay out where you want to be. So starting with the ultimate, what is the culture you're trying to create is really important, and it should be a culture that values resilience. So you can get caught up in a quagmire of fish. So the resilience is get yourself to a point where you don't need phishing training anymore because everybody understands how phishing works and everybody understands the actions they need to take so that phishing is no longer a major thought. It is ingrained. It's part of the DNA of the organization to not click.
Yeah,
It's part of the DNA of the organization to say, I probably should let others know that this is out there because they may have it too. So you teach them to look for those telltale clues. What does it look like? What is the structure of the envelope that the fish is in? um, what is the lure that is being dangled in front of you to go ahead and click on that? um, Immutable truths come out of that. Nothing really comes for free, especially in an email. If you don't know that person, why are you accepting candy from strangers?
there should be no emotion other than possibly anger in your email.
um, it is. I guess I'm going to theoretically push back on that a little bit. It should be, when you're doing the teaching, you're doing that with the I want you to understand rather than here's just the rule. If you see this, click there. If you see that, click here. I mean that it's understanding that it is an avenue of assault. It is part of
Yeah,
the adversary's tactics, techniques, and procedures to get you to bite on something that is going to cause you to reveal one of those deep dark secrets you're supposed to be holding in the deep dark recesses of your heart. you know, um, Metaphorically.
yeah,
Uh,
fine.
excuse me. Um, Understanding how humans work is also the other part of phishing. And I think that everybody can benefit by understanding just a little bit about what makes you buy things on impulse, what makes you.
What are those biases that you have that you're
That's
unaware of?
right. That's right. It's do you take action on everything, or do you say, I need to think about this for a minute before I go ahead and take action?
Well,
You
I
know,
I find this whole line of thought really fascinating. Everything from the cognitive biases that we all use every day to make decisions over to behavioral science of how do people actually learn and process information and what
right?
can we do in order to create a more conducive environment over to just the general. psychology of why do people, click on phishing emails? Why do people let somebody tailgate in behind them? So I find the whole area very fascinating, and one of the things that I've spent a lot of my career studying is that social engineering for good aspect. Because I was on a red team, did a lot of social engineering to break into places, and to me, like the thought that just kept crossing my mind was, if we can use this against people, there has to be a way we can use it to make people more secure. And to that, it really just tossed me down the path of behavioral science, where I got to work. This was my little, I guess, tiny stint of working with academia. I got to work on writing some coursework on exactly this, how we build effective uh, security awareness training programs. And one of the cool things is that the primary thing professors were looking at and researching was that behavioral science piece, and so
Hmm.
it's such a critical element. I mean, and it's not necessarily these massive mind-blowing things, but, we talked about how phishing simulations to help to make somebody less likely to fall for that same type of attack. Well, when you study behavioral science, well, they talk about identical elements theory, which is the classic example of this is when you buy a new car, you drive it off the lot, and all of a sudden you start seeing that car everywhere you look. Well, that's identical elements theory in action. Well, how do we apply that to cybersecurity? We do that simply by running phishing simulations and making sure that at the end
Hmm.
of that, we have really good just in time training so that they learn about urgency or authority or these different tactics. And in doing so, it helps them to become very aware of urgency. Now, whenever they see it anywhere, whether it's in their email or over the phone or in person, they're going to get skeptical of it because they've, got that virus definition, if you will. And so I look at it as there's so much of that we can apply to our programs to make them more effective. I mean, and you mentioned it about, just empathy and just
Hmm.
leading with the carrot, and that is there's behavioral science principles around that too.
Sure,
So
sure.
yeah, it's fascinating area.
Well, I guess the other buzzword of the day besides fish is artificial intelligence. How
Got a
how
slide for that.
how can we help the real intelligence that the humans have through artificial intelligence, and trying to figure out how AI tools can help as they teach.
Yes.
So I'm not advocating total AI replacement for humans. What I'm saying is that it's a good place to teach the behaviors and teach the opportunities, but it's also getting to that next level of understanding. AI is a brilliant tool if used correctly.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, I think that's what everyone is focused on right now is how do we better utilize AI, whether
Mhm.
it's from a defense perspective. And I'd like to see a lot more or I guess AI adoption inside of just the commercial sector in general. I think that and the government sector and all of them really. But I still think there's a little bit of a hesitancy around trusting AI. And while I can appreciate that because I have a hesitancy around it, I also look at the battlefield. And I
Mhm.
see that the bad guys are already using it. They're already phishing our users based on their role in the organization. They understand our organizational hierarchy. They're using deep fakes. I've talked to multiple CISOs now that have seen real world deep fakes, some of them multiple. And it's it's happening. It's changing on a day-to-day basis. And if we want to keep up, we've got to start utilizing AI. And I do think AI is how we keep the bad guys out even with their AI. So I'm optimistic there.
So I'm optimistic, but I also have the counterbalance of AI is not a substitute for communicating.
No, no,
It
I think
it is an enhancement, but you still have to have that personal
yeah,
connection to whatever the issue is, and having a personal connection with the people you work with, the people that are you're trying to get to say don't click on that fish. um, and it's also understanding the business processes and things that are normally the subject of a phishing attack. You know, uh, the person that's using the AI to get you to react differently to an email, the one that is doing a little bit of research available from the many things that are on the internet. I'm sure that if you were to spend enough time on the internet, you'd figure out what I had for lunch last week.
it's a possibility. A lot of people actually do post everything they eat for lunch, so that wouldn't
Yeah.
be that difficult.
Well, yeah, but I don't think I've ever taken a photograph of my food. Um,
That's fair.
I think if you went to um, Facebook, you'd see that I have grandchildren, and that's my focus is family and things like that. But I also have that practical insertion of the wisdom given to me over the many years that I have been doing this work in security.
I think where AI is gonna help the most in defense is A, it can do things that we haven't been able to do before.
Hmm.
So, sentiment analysis, being able to read between the lines a little bit.
Right.
I think there's a lot of areas that it can help there. But the other big one is just being able to sort through large sets of data very quickly.
Hmm.
So, when I look at things like, let's take DLP. I'll pick on it because it's always been really lousy for false positives, and it's either, it doesn't give you enough alerts or gives you way too many alerts, but it's one of those tools that has been hard to dial in. So, in that scenario where we get a ton of false positives still, the AI can go and help us sort through those and prioritize and understand which ones are actually critical that need our time. So
Well,
I think it's gonna be things
yeah.
like that where we see the most immediate value out of it.
Well, it's also understanding, the power of agentic AI, where it actually is serving in place of the human making decisions,
Yeah.
and it sees the conditions and it says, nope, don't click, and it either defeats the agent that is asking you to click, or it puts that off in a place where you don't have to worry about it now. It's not going to go anywhere else. Um,
That just actually gave me a great idea. I mean, when you think about it now, AIs are gonna be clicking on links in emails all the time in the near future. So there's potentially the ability to fish the AI to get it to click too. Think about
yeah,
it. I mean, I get
yeah.
I have AI bots everywhere already. So how
Well, I
long
mean,
before it's checking those links in the emails too?
it's a normal defense tactic to find out what the enemy's about, and find out what their tactics and techniques and procedures are, and then design countermeasures to those. So, if an email comes from an unknown source, maybe it goes to a holding pen.
Yeah.
And it says you have a chance to think about this before you act on it. We have disabled all links until you are understanding that this is a good email.
Yeah, no, I like programs like that.
Yeah,
The other thing I like is the ability to have AI do things like, "Hey, this email uses urgency. Be careful." Um,
yes. I
those
mean,
are
that's
things
that's
that
that
we
that's an
couldn't have
available
done 2
feature
years
now.
ago, but
So
we
yeah,
can now.
yeah. I also like the warnings that are available through a lot of these public sources. So, CISA has a very good treatment of what AI can and cannot do. Very well worth doing the Google search and finding that. But I also know that understanding AI itself and the power of AI is informative to it helps you do good work, but
Yeah.
B, it also tells you where the phishing landmines are planted so you don't step on them.
Yeah, well, not even just phishing. I mean, when it comes to the AI threat, I think there's, just so many different things that we could get hit from for sure.
Yeah.
In fact I think it was Amazon. I saw an article about how they had seen a 700% increase in attacks, hitting their perimeter just in 2024 alone.
Yeah,
Uh,
um, I can imagine that that is a very accurate figure. I can imagine though that there is a percentage of that figure that are unknowns
yeah. Oh, I'm
that
sure.
still have yet to be resolved.
Oh, absolutely. I just think we don't see an increase like that unless the machines are already attacking. It's just not Terminator style. It's not even any cool hacker style like in the Hollywood movies. But
You don't hear the music in the background, the dun 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 music.
I mean, I don't know. I the couple day or a couple weeks ago, the news around AI was so crazy. I was almost feeling it. We've got GPT-03 that was
Hmm.
at the general artificial intelligence level, but then they moved the field or the finish line, or rather the goal or objective, and so it's not officially AGA or artificial general intelligence, but it's close. And then
Hmm.
and then you've got you know the Willow processor from Google. um, there's just some really, really, crazy stuff that's been happening lately. And then you look at some of the predictions of, potentially, quantum computers that sit on our desktop and, that we can offload stuff to in just, a year or two. AI agents working in the workforce beside us, potentially in Slack, asking us questions about stuff. Like, I don't know, it's exciting. I think it's gonna be really fun to watch technology continue to go on this, like, crazy, insane, trajectory that it's been on, and I think AI is only gonna accelerate it more.
So I think the next plateau for AI is probably when you see that advice pop up inside of an application you're working on. It says, "Are you sure you want to do that?"
I was thinking you were gonna say singularity because 'cause we're close.
Well, so I think just prior to that, we're going to get the kind of that computerized voice that says, "Don't click there; it'll make me angry, and you wouldn't like me when I'm angry."
Yeah. No, I could imagine that, some of the use cases, I mean, CES last week, just there were some really cool stuff there, but
Yeah.
I digress and get way off topic, but I think that AI brings just a great amount of opportunity and a lot of threat. Um, on the threat side, what are you most concerned about from an awareness perspective? 'Cause it changes what we need to be training people about.
I think that um, the general nature of exploits that are out there, the things that are we're seeing, that needs to be broadcast to help people understand two things. First of all, that nothing is perfectly safe, but it's also how ingenious the adversaries are becoming. They're working at the same speed, and sometimes, colloquially, I think they have better funding, um, but
Well, they
they're
do, they've got the funding to CrowdStrike with no overhead. I
yeah,
mean,
that's
no
exactly what it
overhead.
is. They so by each of their criminal successes, and let's just face it, they're in the criminal element.
Oh, they
Every
are.
one of their
Yeah,
criminal successes causes us to have to expend more capital and energy to figure out how to change our position.
yeah. Well,
That's
that's
one of
why
the
we
things
don't
that
want anyone to pay the ransom. The problem is when that CEO is in the hot seat and they've gotta choose between paying the ransom and not paying it, and paying it just makes more sense. It gets paid, and the problem is that makes them just so much better every single time we pay, and it makes
well
the threat worse.
and so that we have the social responsibility cost of doing business, right? The things that we do to make better whatever we're making and more of whatever we're making, so that it can be a growth business.
Yeah.
That same problem is faced by the criminals. It's just that their motivations are different than ours. Our motivations are, deliver whatever our product is. In the case of Penn State, it's research and it's learning and it's thinking of the next greatest things that can be thought of. Um, in the case of any other manufacturer, it's bigger, better, faster, cheaper. And it if we're not thinking on that plane, then AI can easily come in and help us to learn their way, which is not always the best way because sometimes it's AI for a criminal syndicate. So let's try to figure out how to train AI to teach us to be better
Yeah.
and help us to be better, and solve that bigger, better, faster, cheaper riddle for us.
Yeah.
Um, but let's also have an AI agent that says, by these signatures that I see, or by this behavior I see, you really need to be careful here. And it's basically just putting up that amber flashing light at the intersection. You can still go through. You don't have to stop, but you should be looking to the left and to the right as you go through.
So I think that's gonna come, but I think that'll probably be another couple years down the road.
Mhm.
Mostly not because we don't have the technology, but because we don't have the adoption of things like augmented reality glasses that we need. But the second that those become the standard place, they'll be watching everything, warning
Mhm.
you about things like that, and I'm actually excited about that. I honestly have thought for years it'd be great to just get everyone augmented reality glasses that warn them of risks, and then we'd be done. Uh, seems like an expensive proposition, so we'll
Yeah.
find other tactics.
Yeah, but on the opposite side of that, there is the one of the comedy shows did a skit where Siri was in the house, or they didn't call it Siri, but it was kind of the same thing. Um, and it said, "Did you really need that second bowl of ice cream, Bob?" you know, really, what you need to do is pay more attention to the children. It's kind of
Yeah.
that little soft voice, that Siri-like voice, and it was basically being your parents in a situation where you should be the parent.
Yeah, no, I get it. I've seen a bunch of those skits,
I
all kinds of
I
different
I like it when we think of AI as a tool to enable us to be better than we were yesterday. I
yeah,
like AI when it says, "Here are the signatures that I see that are signs of danger. You should probably pay more attention to this."
yeah,
Or AI can say, "Here's a different way to think about this."
yeah. And I
That's
mean, AI should
that's
be
where it's
helping
important.
us. It should be helping us be smarter, be better at, be more organized,
Hmm.
move quicker. When you watch CNBC, that's one of the big things they're talking about is how these, software companies were able to increase production significantly over in 2024, and all without increasing the headcount at all. And I think we're gonna see a lot of that continuing for a while where we don't see a lot of new hiring, we just see companies doing more with the same amount of people that they have.
And we should react to that appropriately. And then it's not that AI is taking away jobs. AI is allowing us to think differently so we can do more.
Yeah,
And that's where people are not being replaced by AI. They're being given an opportunity to do something new.
and when we do hit singularity and AI becomes smarter than we could ever be, then it helps us. I mean, it's already helping us medically where we see advances in
Mhm.
medicine and, new compounds that are discovered through AI. And we've only just begun to scratch the surface. So, as we hit singularity and and it's a real reality, it's crazy that we're talking about this, but as we get there, it will create new medical procedures. It might cure cancer. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And I think that's what the beauty of it is if we can create something smarter than us, we can still have all of our own creativity, but have something to solve those really, really difficult problems.
I think the singularity moment is variable by who you are and what your personality is, but in some ways, I think we're already there.
Oh, well, depending if it on who we're taking, we've definitely hit singularity in a few ways. So, all right, any sort of final words of wisdom for our viewers today?
I think that uh, it's important to be thinking about technology, be thinking about um, the goodness of technology. Um, the goodness of technology can prevent us from biting on the fish. The goodness of technology can help us think differently about the things that are going on in our world today. Um, it can also help us to do our own work um, better. It can help us to think outside of whatever the box is. And I think that we should be embracing it from the goodness side of it and being aware of AI and phishing's misuse is important. And so I think from a phishing perspective, education has got to be one of those things that you have out there, and it can't just be in the form of the derbies, the drills, or the negative aspects. It has to be, no kidding. Here's one that came in last week. See what this is. What do you think? And get us to be thinking still, rather than just looking for the hey, we saved you from 57 fish this week.
Yeah.
Which is a good number to know, but why? How? What can I do better so I don't have to worry about the tool taking care of my social responsibility to not click on that link?
And it's really not that many tips the users need to know. I don't
Mhm.
know the exact number, but it has to be only like 5 or 10, core concepts that if they learn, they're gonna be fine.
Yeah,
And,
I imagine 10 is probably a good number because then you can equate that to 10 rules for dating my daughter, 10 commandments, 10 things that you should be doing on
do
your
you
spare
have 10
time.
rules for dating your daughter?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. She's married.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got grandkids now, so it's things I want to tell my grandkids, 10 things I want them to know.
I like it. Well, hey, thank you. It's been a fabulous episode, and for everyone joining in, on this live, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow for another episode.